Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. A couple of hours ago, the Washington Post, our hometown newspaper here in the nation's capital, published an op-ed by former FBI Director Jim Comey. In the piece, Comey explains that whatever surveillance the Obama Justice Department conducted on the 2016 Trump campaign was entirely justified and within bounds. Nothing weird about it at all. Yes, American citizens were monitored electronically without their knowledge, but it wasn't spying. Of course it wasn't spying. It was investigating. It was done for your own good. And if you don't like it, you're unpatriotic and possibly mentally ill. That's Comey's position. What the op-ed did not contain was any evidence at all that what he said is true. Comey is a bitter partisan with a long history of shading the truth, but he suggests you've got to trust him anyway. It's your duty to trust him. Okay. Well, here's another idea. We could see for ourselves exactly what happened in 2016. We could declassify all the relevant information and then make it public. That way we wouldn't have to take anyone's word for what happened. Comey's word, Trump's word, anyone else's word. The president suggested doing just that. The left is outraged by the idea. Watch.
Trump has every reason to believe Barr will use his new powers to aid the president's anti-deep state propaganda efforts. Trump giving Barr unilateral authority over classification is just a huge deal in the world of intelligence agencies. Barr will be able to override other agencies' independent classification determinations. And the goal of all this here seems pretty clear. It's basically to give Sean Hannity material for his television show. So the plan, as it appears now, is essentially a kind of purge of the ideologically suspect members of the intelligence apparatus.
It's a purge, like Joseph Stalin. Unless we stop the release of this information, people will die. That's what they're telling you. Just another day of balanced news coverage on MSNBC. Keep in mind as you watch and rewatch that clip that Chris Hayes is not a flack for the CIA. He's a member of the National Press Corps, but he isn't arguing for openness. Just the opposite. Hayes is arguing, and using his position as a public advocate to argue, against giving the public more information. These are not military secrets, by the way, or the names of U.S. agents working undercover overseas. The information in question is about how the FBI spied on Americans while investigating crimes that we now know did not occur. So what could possibly be the justification for keeping all of that secret, the details secret? Really, the only justification would be to protect the intel agencies from embarrassment. That's what they fear. And that's exactly why the former director of the CIA, John Brennan, and so many others are anxious to preserve the veil of secrecy.
I think it's critically important that the counterintelligence professionals continue to carry out their responsibilities and resist these unwarranted and very, very irresponsible efforts to try to undermine what they're doing.
Okay, so John Brennan thinks it's risky, unwarranted, very irresponsible to let American citizens know whether their law enforcement agencies abuse their power. That kind of transparency, again, is irresponsible. Okay. So what if we applied the same standards to John Brennan himself? You know that after leaving the White House, Brennan was allowed to keep his security clearance, and that clearance increased his value as an employee once he entered the private sector. It allowed him, among other things, access to classified information, which he could then selectively leak to his colleagues at MSNBC. So how does giving classified information to John Brennan help American national security? Well, it doesn't. It helps only John Brennan. Keep in mind, this is a man who's accused his political enemies of treason, a death penalty offense.
This is nothing short of treasonous because it is a betrayal of the nation. He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Treasonous is defined as a betrayal of trust as well as aiding and abetting the enemy. And so that was the word that came to my mind.
That was for the crime of holding a press conference with Vladimir Putin last summer in Finland. He was talking about the president. What you just saw is not stable behavior. John Brennan is exactly the sort of person who should not have a security clearance. Close to a year ago on this program, we made that point. Brennan no longer works for the federal government in any capacity. He holds no official post. And yet, according to two sources we spoke to exclusively today, Brennan retains perhaps the most valuable asset he had in government, a top-secret security clearance. It is terrifying to think that John Brennan still has access to any of that information. Brennan is an out-of-the-closet extremist. This is not a man who should have a security clearance. So shortly after that aired, the president announced that he was revoking John Brennan's security clearance. That was, as we said, almost a year ago. It was July of 2018. What happened next? Well, pretty much nothing. Apparently, as of tonight, John Brennan still has a security clearance, amazingly enough, as he works for MSNBC. According to the New York Times, the president's order was, quote, hampered by aides who slow-rolled the president and by Justice Department officials who fought Mr. Trump on it. Keep in mind that Paul Ryan, then the Speaker of the House, mocked the idea publicly when Trump said he was going to revoke Brennan's security clearance. According to the New York Times, the same thing happened with documents that the president wanted declassified. The bureaucracy fought back against the elected president and won. This seems to be happening a lot recently. According to Bob Woodward's book, on multiple occasions, Gary Cohn, the National Economic Council director, prevented the president from pulling out of a trade deal simply by stealing the relevant order off his desk when he wasn't looking. The president ordered troops out of Syria last December. You remember that, but that order has not been laid down. It's been delayed and mitigated again and again. Now it looks like troops will stay in Syria indefinitely. In fact, we're now sending troops to the Middle East in even larger numbers, in directly contravening the president's campaign promises. And as we just showed you, the same might happen with the president's latest call for declassification. John Brennan, among others, is calling for the bureaucracy to ignore the order. Think about that. Like so many on the left, Brennan is doing precisely what he accuses others of doing. You're undermining democracy, they scream, even as they work to do just that. How are they doing it? Well, to recap civics at its most basic level, all authority in representative democracy flows from voters. The president and the vice president are the only elected officials among the millions who work in the executive branch of government. If you subvert their policies ratified by voters, you are subverting democracy itself. Brennan obviously knows that. He doesn't care, but the rest of us should care.
Christopher Steele, the author of that anti-Trump dossier, refusing to cooperate with federal prosecutors reviewing the Russia probe. Here's what former CIA Director John Brennan had to say about that dossier 2 years ago.
Do you know who commissioned the Steele dossier?
I don't.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done.
But is the former CIA director still trying to keep things secret?
Fox News contributor and legal analyst Trey Gowdy, now a free man in the free world, as chair of the House Oversight Committee.
You sound like he was arrested.
Yes, no, but I'm saying now he's free to speak. Mr. Gowdy, as you looked at that witness and we watched the tape from 2017, do you really think he didn't know who did the dossier, and do you really think the CIA didn't use it?
I don't know which is worse, that he had no idea who investigated the Steele dossier. What Comey also was not familiar with Chris Steele when we asked him about him. So I don't know which is worse, that you give people all these powers and they have no idea who under them is using it, or the worst case scenario is that they may have misspoken when they gave their testimony before Congress.
So do you think they were lying, or do you think they just didn't ever ask questions as to who wrote the dossier and investigate it?
You know, I don't know, Ansley. I try really hard not to accuse people of committing crimes unless there's sufficient factual predicate for it. I know I spent a lot of time asking Jim Comey about the origins of the Russia probe. I was stunned to learn that he had no idea Peter Strzok signed the initiation document. I was stunned to know how little he knew about Chris Steele and why he was defrocked as an FBI source, but later went back to Bruce Orr. Again, I don't know which is worse, that they didn't know or that they did know and they're not leveling with us.
Mr. Chairman, if you were on the stand today and had Brennan in front of you today, what would you ask him?
I think I'd go back to the beginning. I mean, I understand why our country was really interested in what Russia was doing to us. I want to better understand when that became commingled with this belief that the Trump campaign was somehow in cahoots with Russia. So go back to the very beginning. What's the factual predicate for Russia? What's the factual predicate for believing the Trump campaign was involved? Then you're going to get into George Papadopoulos and whether or not you provided the information that you later extracted from him. Then we're going to get into FISA, the fall of 2016. Those are two separate lines of inquiry, the origins of the probe and then the FISA application. So I would go chronologically and just figure out what John Brennan knew and when. Then we'll get into his briefing of Harry Reid and whether or not that was the That was the leak where the rest of the world learned about the dossier.
So a lot of people are saying, okay, now the Democrats are pushing back, saying we're going to unveil the ways and practices of our intelligence community, therefore compromising future investigations. So Adam Schiff is really concerned about that. But was he concerned about that last year when he asked President Obama 2 years ago, asked President Obama to declassify all the Russian information? In fact, here's one of the quotes. He says, while Trump stonewalls the public from learning the truth about his obstruction of justice, Trump and Barr conspire to weaponize law enforcement and classified information against their political enemies. The cover-up has entered a new and dangerous phase. This is un-American. Now, that's Adam Schiff today. In 2016, President Obama can and must declassify as much as possible about Russia hacking our elections. Rest assured, Trump won't. What Adam Schiff should we believe?
Neither one. Here's the thing. Schiff is an overtly ambitious, partisan, wannabe senator from California. So your expectations should be exceedingly low for Adam Schiff. What I find amusing is the duplicity with which the D.C. media covers these events. Remember in 2016 and 2017, the front page of almost every major newspaper was some leak of classified information in 2016 and 2017. They didn't care about that. Now they're concerned that Bill Barr, as he looks into the origins of this investigation, may disseminate classified information. So, Schiff, your expectations should be really low. The media, that's where you should be very disappointed in the duplicity you've seen over the last 2 years.
Yeah, it will continue. I have no doubt about that.
Right. Here's what James Comey said. James Comey in a column today says there was no corruption, there was no treason, there was no attempted coup. Those are lies, dumb lies at that.
Yeah, and then he also said the FBI wasn't out to get Trump.
Thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are 99.9% of all FBI agents are wonderful people. Unfortunately, the ones that Comey picked to lead this probe wanted Clinton to win $100 million to nothing, thought Trump was destabilizing for the democracy, promised to stop his campaign, had an insurance policy if he won, and then was more interested in impeachment than he was in figuring out what Russia did to us in 2016. So there are lots of really, really good FBI agents. Unfortunately, Comey didn't pick any of them to be involved in 2016. Whatever damage has been done to the FBI, Jim Comey looked no further than himself for that.
All right. Great, Dowdy. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
You too.